When I published that video on why I hate Activision so much, one of the most recurring comments I received was, "What about Konami?" Or, "Doesn't Konami suck more?" If we're comparing Activision to other awful game companies, I still think Activision is the worst. Mostly for very personal reasons. Activision's greedy business practices have ruined Spyro, Tony Hawk Pro Skater, Guitar Hero, Crash, yes, which I'll be getting into in another video, and Call of Duty. By comparison, Konami doesn't really get under my skin nearly as much. I'm more so disgusted with their behavior and disappointed in them. In some ways, that's even worse than Activision's greedy practices because Konami is basically on a whole new level of awful business. Much like Nintendo's glory days as a sex hotel business, Konami began as a jukebox rental and repair company that eventually switched over to producing arcade games. During the early 1980s, they created hit titles like Frogger and Super Cobra. Now, if you were a kid in the 1980s, you only knew two things: the fear of nuclear war and Frogger. These popular games helped Konami ascend from just an average logoless company in Japan to a global video game publisher and developer. After the establishment of Konami of America, they began developing a number of MSX and Famicom games like Metal Gear, that cool TMNT game, Gradius, Contra, and my personal favorite Castlevania. It was at that time that Konami really started to make a name for themselves. These consistently good to decent releases allowed Konami to build a devoted fan base and generate hype for each new game. People regarded this game developer as one of the best. With the dawn of the 64-bit era, such titles as Metal Gear Solid, Symphony of the Night, Silent Hill, and Dance Dance Revolution carried Konami's reputation and financial status. But things began to fall apart during the 2010s. See, in 2013, it seemed like Konami had it all figured out. They had just unveiled Metal Gear Solid V: The Phantom Pain to the public to almost universal praise. Fans of the series were fanatically excited to get a new next-gen Metal Gear Solid installment as they had been waiting a solid 5 years for the announcement on what would be the next real MGS game. Sure, Ground Zeroes was announced in 2012, but while that still garnered hype and attention, the 2013 unveil of The Phantom Pain was what really drove excitement for MGS5. However, there was a bit of a sour note to The Phantom Pain's announcement. Kojima, the voice, the man, the legend within Konami, and many of their hit titles claimed that MGS5 would be his last Metal Gear Solid project he'd be working on. Unlike the various instances before this, where Kojima said that a Metal Gear Solid game would be his last until inevitably returning to the series, he claimed he was serious about this announcement. But this didn't mean he'd be leaving Konami entirely. Yet. Kojima plainly said he would just be stopping his involvement in the Metal Gear franchise, which didn't seem fishy at all. Yet. After all, it's not hard to see why someone would want to stop work on a series of games that have been going on for years and years, so like I said, no one suspected anything nefarious. So, Konami publicly operated normally as the months went on, and Metal Gear Solid Ground Zeroes released in March of 2014 to mixed critical reception. Basically, Ground Zeroes was a $30 demo for The Phantom Pain, something to hold people over as the real MGS5 experience was having development issues. And while many fans were justifiably angry, this release wasn't really too controversial. It was a blunder for Konami, but at this point in the official Konami timeline, where Konami wasn't dead, no one suspected that anything was wrong within Konami. They were still a revered video game developer, and what cemented this even further was PT, an abbreviation for Playable Teaser, that was released on the PS4 in August of 2014 as a short, exciting promotion for the next Silent Hill installment, aptly titled Silent Hills. Silent Hill fans, much like Metal Gear Solid fans, had been anticipating a new entry in the series ever since Silent Hill Downpour came out to lukewarm reception. While some liked the story and atmosphere, a common point of criticism among fans were the combat and technical mishaps. So, when a new Silent Hill game was announced being produced by Kojima and Mexican filmmaker Guillermo del Toro in collaboration collaboration with Norman Reedus as the protagonist, people naturally got very hyped very quickly. Seeing as the last installment was disappointing, numerous people began to assume that this brand new next-gen entry could redeem the franchise and make up for Downpour. Not only that, but PET's combination of beautiful visuals, atmosphere, and solid horror gameplay seemed to indicate a survival horror masterpiece in the making. Nevertheless, PET and Kojima's excitement over the project gave fans more hope for the future of Konami's projects. That is, until March 2015, where the momentum of hype and love for Konami and their games came to a sudden halt, with the news that they were removing Kojima's name from the MGS5 box art and descriptions. Not to mention the abundance of reports that claimed that Kojima was being demoted and going to leave the company as early as December from an apparent feud between him and the CEO of Konami. What's even more insulting to the man behind the curtain was that Konami announced they'd be shifting focus away from individual studios like Kojima Productions. Alongside the mistreatment of Kojima and his studio, there were also several reports surfacing of Konami limiting their employees' internet, making their workplace hell, and overall just unethically treating their employees. As the days went on, more and more came into the public eye about Konami abusing their workers. Whilst these reports were released and more information arose that painted Konami in a negative light, it seemed like the world had turned on them, and for good reason too. Journalists and YouTubers made exposés about the company, and all the while, Konami apparently kept going deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole, only serving to further show themselves as an awful company. From copyright takedowns of these exposés to firing multiple people to removing themselves from the New York Stock Exchange, it was almost as if the situation couldn't get any worse. That is, until Silent Hills was cancelled. Yes, in the midst of all this, Konami announced that Silent Hills would be no more and ordered for the removal of PET from the PSN store. I don't know what Konami was thinking at this point. After a month of controversy, let's add more fuel to the fire. This is probably the most frustrating thing about this whole situation. I didn't get my PS4 until December of 2015, 8 months after PET was removed from the PSN store, and since no one around me still has it, I never got to play it. Sure, I watched it, but I cannot tell you how upsetting it is to have not played a game people regarded as the pinnacle of horror atmosphere. The final nail in the coffin came for Konami and their gaming legacy when they announced that they would stray their focus away from AAA titles to mobile games, as that's where the future of gaming is headed according to them. So, allegedly, they shifted their business away from digital entertainment to mobile gaming. So allegedly, this happened despite not having produced any popular mobile games from 2015 until now, and also announcing more AAA titles like Metal Gear Survive. What's even more insulting is that Konami has been using their game franchises as a way to market their gambling products in Japan, like a Contra machine, or the newly announced Castlevania Busty Pachinko. Or how about the Silent Hill Pachinko? Fuck pachinko machines and fuck this behavior. This is how you treat your beloved properties? By making them into gambling machines? I understand it's a surefire way to make money, but as someone who's a fan of these IPs, I find this behavior incredibly disrespectful. There's a reason why you are now hailed as the most evil company in gaming today. Honestly, transforming Castlevania and Silent Hill into pachinko machines is a lot worse than Spyro or Crash in Skylanders. At least in those games, you could actually play as the characters, and it kept some of the spirit of the source material, albeit very minimally. Then there's Metal Gear Survive, the newest AAA Konami game that shouldn't exist because the actual company said so. What happened to the future of gaming being on mobile and pachinko machines, huh? Anyways, while I'm cautiously optimistic about this Metal Gear spin-off, as it could possibly be fun, it does seem like a lazy cash grab to profit off the success of the Metal Gear Solid franchise, which is a bit insulting. The idea of a co-op zombie shooter is not exactly original, so once again I can't say I'm not disappointed. But examples like this, along with the incomplete Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain, are why Konami has the terrible reputation they do now. In just one short year, they've managed to turn their community against them and plummet both financially and socially. When people think of Konami, they don't think, hey, what a great developer, I love their games. Instead, they think, oh, Konami? How disappointing they did that shit to Kojima and their fans of Castlevania, Silent Hill, Contra, and Metal Gear. I used to love their games. But it's not all bad, I suppose. Kojima has moved on to create his own studio with a large fan backing and a new, stellar-looking game, which is kind of a Silent Hill spiritual successor with the added bonus of a naked Norman Reedus. Former Castlevania series producer Koji Igarashi is working on a spiritual successor to the franchise called Bloodstained: Ritual of the Night that looks pretty great and has a large fan backing as well. And while Metal Gear and Contra still remain in the clutches of Konami and their mistreatment, there are plenty of spiritual successors and fan games out there to sink your teeth into if you're interested, I guess. Furthermore, if Metal Gear Solid Survive really does bother you, don't acknowledge it. Let it be forgotten and don't buy it. Controversy is the one thing Konami has going for it, so if you start giving it to them, well, that's exactly what they want. This video is counterintuitive to that, but I feel it's necessary to give my thoughts and recollection of the events that transpired to lead Konami down the path to their own self-destruction. As always, if you disagree or agree with me, let me know in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching and take care. Have a wonderful day, and goodbye.